right, welcome back for another CBSI Hot 10 show. Make sure you go over to comicbookinvest.com and check out the article where I hopefully put a few extra tidbits and details that I don't cover here on the show tonight. And while you're at it, check out all the content we do have here on the channel. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit the alert button so you don't miss anything, and you keep telling your friends so we can keep growing the channel. And if you want to see this week's Hot 10, just hang out for a few seconds after the intro, and I will be right back.
Notable sales.
As usual, we start off with our notable sales, and this week we have an interesting one. This is one of those employee-only staff holiday giveaways over at Boom, where this is Grimm #1, and this book is selling for a ton. Again, not easy to come by, very hard to get. Again, this is a staff holiday giveaway, so only staff over at Boom, I think, got this copy, and it features, both Grimm and Something is Killing the Children, but this is Grimm #1, and it sold this week for an all-time high twice, as two copies from the same seller both sold for $800 a piece. $800, which beats the previous all-time high from a while back, I think of $700. But that was a while ago, and the actual last sale was back in April, and it was only $350. So to go from $350 to $800, that is a huge jump for this book. And again, I know it's a tough one to come by, but I'm just surprised a sale like this took place, all on the heels of that news about Grimm. We'll get into that a little bit later on the list, but that is our first notable of the week. And up next, I have something else I want to talk about as far as notable goes. You notice I got my Monster shirt on. This came through with my Kickstarter pledge. And finally, all of us who did take part of the Kickstarter for Monster and the Wolf got our Kickstarter books just this past week or two. And those copies are coming to market, and they're coming in selling for big numbers. I'll be honest, I actually already got rid of a couple of the extras that I got because she bought the issues in pairs, and just to kind of help, cut the cost of what the Kickstarter, ran. I did sell a couple of my copies, a couple of my extras. So, as examples, Monster and the Wolf issues 1 through 3 from the Kickstarters have been selling from anywhere from like $150 to like $300 for individual copies, most of which were limited to like 200. So most of these covers are limited to 200. Yes, there's foils, there's some metals, etc. A lot of options, as you might guess, and a lot of different prices. But by and large, the general pick and choose your sets where you would get like 2 books. We're limited to 200 copies. So that's kind of where we're at. And like I said, copies started out selling for closer to 3. Lately, they've kind of come down a bit, gotten to as low as about 150, most in that kind of $200-ish kind of range. But with that, a lot of copies coming to market as a lot of people are getting their Kickstarter books in this week. Now, the qualified will not be next. The boys need a week off. So I'm actually going to run down the OLI now before I start into with the Hot 10. Just something that I thought would be a good idea to do, and just a few books I did want to speak to. So with that, we are going to quickly go through the outside looking in books on the Hot 10 before I get to the actual Hot 10. So these are 5 books that, while I'm taking note of them selling pretty well, they didn't quite have the volumes, etc., to make the actual list. Here, I'll give my explanations as we go through them. Our first book here, let's go with, speaking of monsters, the second print for issue 4. Classic homage here. You got the radium, etc., but with funny bones. This 1 in 25 on the second print for issue 4. That's what this is. Monsters #4, second print, 1 in 25. Not an easy book to come by because, orders aren't that high, I don't think, these days on a lot of these later printings. It's just getting tougher and tougher for shops to keep up with all this stuff. But still, for this particular book, didn't quite have the volume. It only had just over half a dozen sales. I think I counted up 7 before I had to cut my research down this morning. So over half a dozen sales. It is averaging $60, which is a pretty big number for a 1 in 25 with highs hitting 70. So it is notable, but just not enough volume to make the cut for the actual list this week for me. That's how I look at it. Yes, 7 sales is 7 sales. It's nearly enough, but just not quite as much. So here's another example. We also had the 6th printing for issue 1 that also had a 1 in 25 cover. Also pretty cool toy action figure, kind of like poster with the creases in there. I kind of dig it. But only a pair sold as of this morning when I did my research. So I can't comfortably place a book on the list if there's only 2 sales. That's just me. I know you'll probably see it on other lists out there. Just for my list, 2 is just not enough, even though it is averaging $59 with a high of 60. Why is that? Well, because one sold for 58, one sold for 60, hence the $59 average, because that's easy math to do with only 2 copies sold. Another book in a kind of a similar bucket is another variant. This week's kind of incentive books are the ones that I'm kind of looking at here. And here's another one. Sacrificers. I like this book coming out of the gate. I told you when I did the Wednesday watch list, I like the cover, the Chuma Hill cover here on Sacrificer 17, the 1 in 15. But again, there may not be many out there, but only a pair of sales. And even though it's averaging $37 with a high of 40 for a 1 in 15, both really good premium prices on a 1 in 15, 2 sales, again, just doesn't quite cut it for me. But it is notable, it is worth mentioning, and worth showing here. So I'm just throwing it out there. We'll keep an eye on it. If volumes increase over the next week, maybe it'll show up on next week's list. But for now, just 2 sales wasn't enough. Another book kind of in that same book was the latest issue of Sonic. Yeah, you know, the Sonic RI books, the retailer incentives. This is issue 82, the Natalie Fondrain. I can't remember the name of the artist off the top of my head, but only 4 sales. So again, a little bit more than the last 2, but still only 4 sales, averaging $27, hitting 30 as a high is a good price for a 1 in 15. It is. But again, the volume's just not quite there for me to feel comfortable putting on the main list. And one more incentive again this week. Coming out of the gate, doing pretty well. Yuletide. I'm sorry, this is Yuletide number 2, not number 3. That's a typo on my part. Apologies. But Yuletide number 2, the 1 in 10, the Ito cover. There's a trade dress version on the cover A, but this is the 1 in 10 incentive version. Only 3 sales. It again is averaging $26 with a high of 27. I think there was 2 25s and a $27 sale. So it was really like 25.66 was the average, but you know, we got to round up. But with that, only 3 sales. So again, as you can see here, these are books that are selling at a premium, and it is worth noting and being aware of that. But again, the volume's just not there for me to put them comfortably on my list that I'm making. So with that, those are the outside looking in books I chose for this week. Yeah, there were a couple others I could have thrown in here. Things like Stargate just didn't have the volumes yet, despite the news that we got this week, etc., and a few other things. But those are the 5 that I chose. And before we get into the actual Hot 10 list, which is coming up next now, I want to remind anybody out there who needs supplies, use my code RENA10 to get yourself 10% off your entire order. That's 10% off your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, CGC boxes, your top loaders, pages for your cards, top loaders for your cards, basically anything to keep your comics or collectibles safe. You can use my code RENA10 for 10% off your entire order. If it's easier, here's a QR code that you can also use. And again, take you over to BCW, get your supplies, use my code RENA10 to save yourself 10% off your entire order, because you help out the channel, you get yourself a discount, you really got nothing to lose. And with that, speaking of 10s, let's get into the Hot 10 right now.
Number 10.
And at number 10, our first book is a tricky one for me. This is Aerotech, number 1, and it is a not suitable for work type of book and cover. Granted, I did cover it up with the Rennavision logos. There is nothing that couldn't be shown. It's just a little bit more risque than I felt comfortable with, so I covered it up anyway, even though there is nothing shown on this Howard Chaykin cover. This is a 1 in 5 incentive that came out this week. There was a Kickstarter for this that actually had a trade paperback that had Flops' first interior story in it. I actually did back that because it had Flops in it, and you guys know I'm a big fan of Flops. But this Aerotech book, number 1, this 1 in 5 is coming out the gate, selling pretty well at a premium. Not a ton of volume, but you'll see here with over 10 sales, it had more than our other variants that we just talked about on the outside looking at. At least this one hit double digits and is also selling at a nice premium with an average of $25 for a 1 in 5, high of $75. That's right. high as 75 bucks. If you look at the copies listed right now, most of them are listed for like 70, 75, or are currently at auction with bids and days left at like 40 and 30, etc. So they still might reach that higher mark as we go forward. Something to keep an eye on if you're interested. But again, it's not for everyone. It's got some inappropriate material in there. And like I said, even though this cover was clear to be shown, I still felt a little uneasy in showing it, so I still covered it up with my logo. So hopefully you don't mind. You can go find this out there if you want to see the actual art unfettered with my cover up. But that is the number 10 book of the week. With that, let's keep it rolling and check out what we got here at number 9.
Number 9.
At number 9, we have the Next Thank You Secret Foil Edition for Exquisite Corpses. We should be getting used to this by now, as every single one of these comes out the gate doing pretty well, and then they seem to kind of get forgotten about. 7 times so far. This is issue 7, the 7th time we're getting this. Foil cover on the logo. Thank you edition, 1 per store or 1 per account. And while not coming out quite as hot as some of the others have in the past, still with over 15 sales, averaging 34 bucks, hitting highs of 45. That is still a decent premium for this 1 per book. As again, we see a lot of 1 pers go for only like 10 to 20. So anytime something starts reaching in the 30s right out of the gate and does so in decent volumes, I got to take note of it. And this is yet another one, just like the rest. It is what it is. But it's still lower on the totem pole here at number 9 because that volume isn't quite that high. And those prices aren't as high as some of the other issues that came out prior that we've seen. But still, that's our number 9 book, which will take us to our next one here at number 8.
Number 8.
And at number 8, we have the first appearance for V for Vendetta. Right there, tiny on the cover and inside this book, this is Warrior number 1. Topher has been talking about this one for, it seems like forever now, as everybody's been picking up V for Vendetta number 1, but that is technically not the first appearance of the character or story, as that would be in this UK magazine Warrior. So fantastic first issue. I think we also had the return of Marvel Man inside this as well. Steve Dillon cover. I mean, remember Steve Dillon from Preacher? So that's also an interesting little tidbit on this one. But this particular book is the first appearance for V for Vendetta, and we are getting that television series adaptation. So people have pivoted a little bit and have started picking this up. Yes, there were a couple sales last week and even the week prior, but not many. Like I said, a couple. This week, however, we got up to a dozen sales, which is a 300% jump over last week's volume when the news was at its strongest and newest. So people are recognizing this book this week. They're going out and they're shopping for it. It's averaging 130 bucks. 130 bucks raw. A CGC 6.5 was the highest sale of the week, and it sold for 310. I think there was also a 7.0 sale just the day before that one, and that one was only like 270 or 275 maybe. But still, 6.5, 310 bucks, because this is not an easy book to track down and definitely not an easy one to get in high grade. It was a UK book, so getting here overseas isn't going to be the easiest thing to track down. But again, people are starting to move on to this one as the V for Vendetta is still selling well, that number 1, just not well enough to make the cut here, as Warrior number 1 is standing out at number 8. With that said, let's keep the list rolling and check out what we got next at lucky number 7.
Number 7.
And at number 7, we have our first repeat of the week, and this is Absolute Batman, number 12. First appearance of Killer Croc in the Absolute Universe. And yes, it did drop a couple of spots from last week. I think it was number 4 last week. This week, we're pulling it in here at number 7, as still, most of these Absolute titles are still selling very well and selling for decent prices. Just some of the volumes have slowed from last week to this week, so this is the only one that's still kind of maintained pretty well. Volume's still down a little bit. I think last week we had 50 plus sales. This week we only have 40 plus sales, but that's still better than a lot of other books on the market. So it's still worth noting, and prices and averages have gone up. So our average is up to 13, which is a 30% jump, and our high hit 20 bucks on this one now. And this is only a couple issues ago, and that's a 33% jump as of that. I think we're getting our next new issue next week. I think issue 14, and then December is one the one everyone's looking for. Is Absolute Joker is going to be showing up, and that thing has been pre-selling for over a month now. Some of those variants, etc. But with that said, number 12 still doing well, still showing on the list here at lucky number 7. And with that, let's take a look at our next one here at number 6.
Number 6.
No, you're not seeing things. Back on the list this week is Deadpool Batman, the Marvel version of the crossover event of the two companies clashing heads. The first homage to Hulk 340 with Batman holding his batarangs with Deadpool in the reflection. This one was the standout of the first batch of regular covers. We're not talking incentives, of all the open order covers that weren't store exclusives or incentives. Of the regular covers, this was the standout with a couple of others trailing slightly behind. But this was the one that kind of started selling at premium prices and in bigger volumes. And it is doing so again this week with over 30 sales yet again, which is a 48% jump from last week, averaging $23, which is a 21% rebound over where the prices. Because remember, this was like a $25, $30 book not that long ago. It dipped, and now it's kind of coming back a little bit stronger again. Its highs are back up to 30, which is a 20% jump from last week's highs at 25. Why is that? Well, this is the Marvel version. It's because this week we had the release of the DC version. So with that noted, let's move the list on to our top half and see what we got next at number 5.
Number 5.
And at number 5, we have one of those standout DC versions of this book. Much like the Marvel, DC also had a buttload of covers. There were well over, I think there was at least a dozen, if not more, open order covers that shops could order. A lot of good ones, a lot of good art, etc. And when you have piles like that, there's usually one or two standouts that start pulling away from the pack. Right now, after just a couple of days, I mean, this just came out Wednesday. I got all my data ran through as of Friday morning. This Punisher cover by Nick Dragotta is one of those few standouts. As we're looking here at Batman, Punisher, pretty cool cover here. I noted over 50 sales, of which 30 of them were over the cover price. And the cover price is, what was it, like $7.99 or something like that? So it's averaging about like $9 or a little bit more, with highs already hitting 17. So a lot of undercover price sales pulling that average down for now. But as of late, we're seeing highs hitting 17, a few $15 sales, a few $12 sales. It's just like the last time out. This is one of the few covers that started to pull away from the pack and pull away from that cover price mark, even just after a day or two on the market. So keep an eye out. I do like it. And this is a crossover I would like to see like done as a whole mini. I'd like to see Dragotta do Punisher and and Batman together. I think it would be a pretty cool mini personally. But with that said, that is our number 5 book. So let's take a look at what we have next at number 4.
Number 4.
Now, I could have fudged it so this worked better and this matched up with the last book better, but here we have the next homage to 340, that McFarlane Hulk cover. This time it's done by Bill Sienkiewicz. Deadpool now holding the blades with Batman on the reflection. Yes, it would have worked better if I could have mirrored it with the other one, but it didn't match up that way number-wise, because this book is selling a bit better than the Punisher book, so it had to stand out a bit further from the pack with over 100 sales, at least 55 of which were over that cover price mark that I noted, with highs hitting 15. Again, $15, $12 here, $13 there. More and more premium prices started to sell as this book seems to be pulling away from the pack, just like the other one. I think the Frizen was also, I saw a couple of premium sales on that, as well as the Ryan Sook homage to that Crisis book, or as two others that started to sell for premium prices over that cover price mark, starting to get $10 here or there. And starting to pass those numbers. But volume-wise, matching with the other standout from the Marvel version of this crossover event, we have Batman and Deadpool number 1, with the Deadpool Bill Sienkiewicz cover here as the leader of the pack. Again, we'll see how this goes in the future, but after only a day or so on the market, this is what's standing out from the pack, which is why it's at number 4. And with that, we still have our top 3 left, so let's see what they are.
Number 3.
And at number 3, we do have that Grimm book that I mentioned earlier on in notable sales because it is going to be adapted into, I think, an animated Netflix series. Now, I know what you're thinking. Animated didn't used to excite people, but I'm telling you, the strides in animation these days has been outstanding. I mean, you go from the Arcane over there on Netflix. The Castlevania series over on Netflix was really good. Both versions of it, or both volumes. We also had the Splinter Cell. I just finished that one up. That one was also good. Animation is nothing to be scoffed at. Look at how well Invincible's doing over at Amazon as another example of animated shows pulling their weight. X-Men 97 moving books. So I'm not surprised that Grimm being announced as an animated series coming up is also moving books. This is the cover A. Yes, there are multiple covers on this book, multiple printings on this book, but just counting cover A, I stopped counting after 100 plus sales, which was a huge 1900% jump in volume because there was only like 5 sales last week, if that, and there was some trades, etc. Not a lot of volume last week, but with the news, tons of copies selling for as high as $25. Granted, most have sold at cover or less. And when I say less, I'm saying even online, dollar sales. Yes, there were plenty of dollar sales because this was a heavily printed book with multiple printings as well, with multiple covers. So there were plenty of cheap copies, but quickly those cheap copies cleared. People started paying $10 here, $15 there, and as much as $25 raw for this particular book. Not counting some signed editions that even got a little bit more. Just regular raw book, 25 was the high so far. In addition to that, CGC 9.8s sold earlier in the week for $40. $40. There were multiple $40 sales, and then prices started to trend up, reaching a high of $120 for a 9.8 before the week was out. So definitely things to keep an eye on as we look to more news in the future as far as this animated series is going to go with Netflix. But Grimm has been selling well this week, which is why it is number 3, which leaves us with 2 more to note at the top of the list. So let's see what they are.
Number 2.
More news this week as Redcoat is going to be adapted into a feature film. That's right, Redcoat, one of the Ghost Machine books over at Image in that little Ghost Machine corner of the universe. Redcoat is being adapted. This Jeff Johns series that it was a lot of fun, and I could see them. I can see how this could work as a movie, if not a series. This could have worked as a series, but movie works as well. This Redcoat number 1 has a similar path as Grimm has with this news, meaning I stopped counting after 100 or so sales. There are multiple covers, not as many as Grimm, but there's an A and a B and I think a blank sketch that you can look for this issue 1, and then later printings as well. But 100 plus sales, which is again a similar increase, is 1900% jump because there was only a handful of sales last week, just because nobody was looking at Redcoat until the news hit. No one was paying attention. It was probably one of the lowest selling Ghost Machine books out there, or lowest talked about, I should say, as most people are talking about Rook, they're talking about Hyde Street, but Redcoat, it was kind of on the back burner for most people. Highs hit $12, which is 140% jump because last week the high was cover price, $5. Actually, that's more than a cover. Cover's only $3.99 here, but last week one sold for $5, so the high of $12 is 140% jump. But most of these sales this week, even out of the 100, were for around that cover price mark or $5 or so. So maybe a little bit over, maybe a little bit under. But we are seeing some of those premium prices of $7 sales here, $8 sales there, 10 up to 12. We'll see if this trend continues in the week ahead. We also had some movement on the CGC side of things, not as much as Grimm, but CGC 9.8s did reach $68. Actually, I think it was $67.50, but not a lot have come to market. So who knows where that price is going to go from here. And runs of 12 issues, 15 issues, because I think we're through 15 or so issues released so far, but big chunks of the run were also selling for $50 to $80, depending on how many issues they had in the run. A lot of incomplete runs and sets and chunks like that were being moved as well as just the solo number 1s. So definitely something to keep an eye on in the weeks ahead. Redcoat number 1, thanks to that, movie news coming. So with that, we've got 1 book left, and let's see what's on top. I'm sure you can probably guess what it is.
And our number 1.
It is also related to Redcoat because it's his first appearance, and that was in this Geiger 80-page giant. Yes, the first appearance of Redcoat was inside this book. This is the cover A for it. So it is the one that is most accessible to most people, and the one people kind of recognize, and the one that's selling in more volumes, I guess, than the rest. But there are five, count them, five titles on, five covers on this. This is the Gary Frank Geiger cover for the 80-page giant. But here are the rest, including my favorite, because it features Redcoat on the cover and it's done by Brian Hitch. This option does seem to be the favorite of also the collectors who are paying a premium for this cover over the others. So with that, 60 plus sales, which is much like the last books, a 1900% jump in volumes, as basically there was like 2 copies that sold of this thing last week, and averaging $45, which is a 96% jump in price, because this was not a dollar book by any stretch. This was still like 25 bucks like last week, but now it's averaging 45, with this particular cover hitting the high of 105 raw. That's right, $105 for this B cover raw. This is the B cover for it. There are, like I said, multiple covers on this book. There are 5, including a blank. And CGC 9.8s also hit $200, which is a 153% increase on 9.8 prices from prior. And with those 5 covers, most of the sales are, like I said, in the cover A, which also hit a high of 72 bucks, which was a 243% jump as far as a high price goes, where the Redcoat on the cover on that B cover was the 105 high. So 72 bucks was the high on the green, 105 was the high on the B. Both of them higher than where we were last week by leaps and bounds, and plenty of volume, plenty of prices going up here, and definitely something to keep an eye on in the weeks ahead. Because again, a lot of people turn into that movie news and that TV news these days to start moving books. I guess it's just they're not loving what's going on in the comics. There's no big storylines outside of the Absolute Universe over at DC, I should say. But with that, we can talk about that. We can debate that. We can get a conversation started in the comments down below if you want. But as I mentioned, that's it for tonight. No qualified. The boys will be back next week, I believe. They needed the night off. So with that, you are free to peruse the internet at your leisure now, or check out some of the shows we already have here on the channel. As I am done here for the day. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate you all. And I'll see you all later with some more content. All right.